Okay, so English is a system of sounds. It's just a container. It needs some content. It's a system of sounds, the most important of which are the keywords, which are pen, fish, sun, etc., etc. Let me find them for you on page 8 of this book. Page 8. Fish, pen, hat, sun, box, book, Lipton. They are the cardinal vowels. They are the shape of the mouth. So 3 front, 3 back, and 1 central, which is called schwa. That is the weakest sound of English. Right. And then you combine those sounds with other sounds, especially consonants, to get words. And then the words has got stress, which differentiates lexical categories like contract, contract. One is a noun and one is a verb. Now, on page 14, you have also this argument between husband and wife. We mustn't forget to invite the Watsons. Do you mean there is nothing wrong with inviting the Watsons? This moves you from semantics to pragmatics, in fact, just the intonation, right? As far as the syntax is concerned, I'm sure you are familiar with the trees that the linguists use to show you the structure of the sentence. Well known after Chomsky used it, or even before him, the structurists used the immediate constituent analysis. Now, famous quotations of English. Oh, there is not too much noise, maybe there is a soccer match. So you have "In God We Trust" with the American pronunciation. Yes, we should draw a distinction between RP, received pronunciation of English, which is mostly spoken in the southeast of England, in Kent, and it's supposed to be the King's English, and GA, General American, as I told you about Anthony. His mother would say to him, "Anthony, on Sunday we're going to church," and he would say, I'm not gonna go. Monday we'll go into the soccer because he had some problems with his legs, and he would say, I'm not gonna go, and he would go. Anyway, so gonna, wanna is American, God is American. Another quotation I like is from the King James Version. The foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man hath nowhere to lay his head. Hath is the old form of has. So this is Jesus speaking about himself, referring to himself as the Son of Man, and as a very miserable man. He is homeless. Okay, you have in Shakespeare, by high judging Job, the alliteration, that is Job, Jehovah, God, the name of God for them. And then you have rain and tears. Rain and tears are the same. This is a song by the Aphrodite's child. Now moving to the content of this language, that is the culture of the people who speak it. You have the English on one side, and crossing the Atlantic you find the Americans. I've chosen the 5 most representatives of both cultures. That is the Celts, Richard Lionheart, Henry VIII, Queen Victoria, and Winston Churchill. Rauchen Sie nicht. Okay, what can be said about the Celts? Well, in the 7th century BC, the Celts are said to have come and settled in the south of Britain. Sorry about the noise. It is a marriage, a wedding, very nice. Their martial aristocracy ruled the country. They attacked their neighbors using chariots pulled by horses and iron swords. Sometimes the chariots fought all, their warriors fought all painted in blue. They had plenty of gold and ornaments. Their pagan religion consisted of magic, fire, and human sacrifice. So much for the Celts. Let's move now to page 45 to see. Okay. Well, then they were saved from this harsh ritual by the Catholics, and especially with the strong King Richard Lionheart, who went to free the tomb of Jesus from the hands of the pagans, between brackets, that is the Muslims. But he committed something. The Muslims refused to fulfill their promises to Richard as long as he did not fulfill his promises to them. You see, these people who never fulfill their promises, you can't trust them. So Richard made his worst mistake by killing 3,000 Muslim hostages in one go. Commenting on this event, the historian René Grousset said that was not only an act of barbarism, but also a big mistake. While Salah ad-Din was magnanimous, he would even send his doctor, physician, to cure these warring Christian kings. Now, moving to Henry VIII, he would break from Catholicism to Protestantism. Okay, this King Henry VIII in the 16th century wanted to marry the widow of his brother King Arthur of England. But this marriage was the cause of the break between England and the Catholic Church. It was not accepted by Rome, so he married Anne Boleyn. Again, this marriage caused trouble with the same supreme religious institution of Europe at that time. It controlled the kings and the emperors. So he executed her and disassociated himself and his country from the Roman Catholic Church. He declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. He then could marry many wives, Matna, etc. Now, moving to a queen, you know, feminism would be happy to have a queen ruling not only England, Britain, but the British Empire, on whose the sun never set, from Hong Kong to Canada. Well, in her time, in 1768, the British Captain Cook discovered Australia and New Zealand and opened the door for British settlements in those remote parts of the world. They were followed by the Aboriginals' genocide. And you know, this woman, you know, she could have conquered the whole world because of her technology, but the only barriers to this, of the total colonization of the world by the English, were the rival superpowers of that time, Spain, France, and Holland. Now moving to the next, which is Mr. Yes, in 58, in the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, these big superpowers, English, German, etc., starting to tear each other, world wars, fierce world wars. The colonial rivalry of the 19th century had reached its peak. The French and the Germans were tearing each other apart. The trigger was the assassination of a prince in Sarajevo, Bosnia. Okay, this is page 52. Now, on page 60, Britain was led by Winston Churchill with his big cigar, who tried to stop the attacks of the Germans on the bigger cities of England like London, Birmingham, etc. And eventually England was avoided the invasion by the Germans. He has a famous quotation which says, if you want to free England and Europe from the Nazis, you need a lot of blood, sweat and tears, you know, a lot of suffering to free yourself. And also there is an anecdote that happens between him and famous Irish playwright, Bernard Shaw. Bernard Shaw was slim like me, and Winston Churchill was tabby. And Churchill used to tease Bernard Shaw by saying, if people see you so slim, they would say that England is starving, like Gaza. But Shaw would answer, when they see your tabby, they would know, they would understand. So much for England, or Great Britain, call it as you wish. Let's cross the Atlantic to America, and I have chosen a representative of each race, Geronimo, for the Reds, or Native Americans. The Pilgrim Fathers for the WASP, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. Malcolm X as a representative of Afro-Americans. And of course, famous and very smart presidents, JFK, and our friend Noam Chomsky. Okay, let's try that. Okay, excuse me, the content is coffee. On page 112, yes, 12. You have something about Geronimo. You know, these red tribes were trusting, honest, and welcoming to the invaders, but they would pay much. So you have the Mayas, the Apaches, the Cherokees, the Sioux, the Mohicans. Okay, now it is said that they have crossed from the north, you know, the Bering Straits. And some people even say that America was discovered by the Vikings, because the first recorded European exploration in America is in a Scandinavian language. It refers to Viking sailor Leif Erikson. The Danes had previously invaded their northern neighbors, i.e. Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland, which is Canada. That is, the straits between these nations were very narrow. The Danes, that is, the people of Denmark, Danish, crossed to, let's say, Sweden, then Norway, and then Iceland, and then Greenland, and then Vinland. It was America. But on page 112, what happened to the Indians, especially to Mr. Geronimo, meaning to yarn. For generations, the Apaches had resisted white colonization of their homeland in the southwest by both Spaniards and North Americans. Leader Geronimo continued the tradition of his ancestors from the day he was admitted to the Warriors' Council in 1846. They were well organized. They had their own democracy, participating in raids into Sonora and Chihuahua in Mexico. He was further embittered by the death of his mother, wife, and children at the hands of Mexicans in 1858, while he and all the men of the tribe were absent, befriending the Spanish government. It was big betrayal. He went to visit, in a very friendly intention, the Spanish government. At the same time, the Spanish soldiers were sent to slaughter his family. And this happened maybe 2 or 3 times to this big warrior. And then he worshipped the high spirit, and he was a big fighter. Now, this is the red race. Now, on page 123, we go to the Pilgrim Fathers. They were also called the Puritans. They appealed to the Bible, Psalms 2:8, ask of me, and I shall give thee the heathen of thine inheritance, and the utmost parts of the earth for thy possession. This is the unquote. To justify their use of force to take the land, they cited Romans 13:2, I quote, whoever resisteth the power, resisted the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation, unquote. It was very violent. They were supposed to be a nice group of 200 men and women seeking freedom of thought and religion and founding this big nation, but in fact they were also rather rough. Okay, let me move to the black race on page 137. The black people also suffered a lot at the hands of the whites in America. They resisted. Some of them were called, one of the first slaves was Chicken George. Of course, Abraham Lincoln tried to free the slaves. And then you have Marcus Garvey, you have Elijah Muhammad, you have Rosa Parks, the woman who refused to give up her seat in the front of the bus because the blacks were supposed to sit at the back. And you have Eldridge Cleaver. Of course, Obama was very lucky to come so late and find himself in the White House. The black Muslims. Okay, for the black Muslims on page 143, it was in one of the prisons, because it was said that the number of blacks in prisons were more than those in the street, but this is an exaggeration. It was one of the prisons that Elijah's teachings reached Malcolm X for the first time. Malcolm X was the third leader of the black Muslims after W.D. Farr, the initiator of this movement, and Elijah. He taught his black brothers and sisters to rid themselves from all white values so as to free themselves from his negative drag that have lasted for centuries. He was also an enemy of Christianity, as it is a destructive force used against the blacks, unquote. That is the idea of turn the other cheek. He believed in Jesus, peace be upon him, but refused Christianity. He later left the black Muslims and changed his philosophy so as to accept true Islam in Mecca. He was feared by the white man and was called a giant in a sick world. So as to try to understand Malcolm X, a brief review of his life may help. Well, there's something interesting about him that would come soon. Let me just move to this elegant man and president, JFK, on page 162. Yes, 162. Okay. JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, was the 35th president of the United States from 1961 to 63, who faced a number of foreign crises with the communists of the Soviet Union, especially in Cuba and Berlin. On Friday, November 22, 1963, Kennedy and his wife Jacqueline were in an open limousine riding slowly in an official motor car through downtown Dallas. At 12:30 p.m., he was struck by two rifle bullets, one in the base of his neck and one in his head. He was pronounced dead shortly after arrival to hospital. Communist Lee Harvey Oswald, a 24-year-old Dallas citizen, was accused of the slaying. 2 days later, Oswald himself was shot to death by Jack Ruby, a local nightclub owner with connections with the criminal underworld, in the basement of a Dallas police station. The Warren Commission, however, was not able to convincingly explain all the particular circumstances of Kennedy's murders. CIA, underworld organization, mafia. Kennedy's assassination remains the most notorious political murder of the 20th century and a source of bafflement, controversy, and speculation up to now. Okay. Now, something interesting to read for you. When the Americans felt that they had built their nation and wanted to free themselves from the English, especially when the English imposed on them the taxes on tea, and they had this Tea Party, etc. battle. They had fighters, but they were amateurs. They were called Minutemen. So in the War of American Independence, colonial militiamen who were supposed to be ready to fight the British Red Tunics in 1 minute notice. So the colonization of America by England had been an important chapter in the history of the USA. In fact, Britain sailed to that continent in the late 16th century. The settlements began when the Pilgrim Fathers arrived on the Mayflower and landed somewhere named Plymouth. The colonization had lasted for a certain time until the need for freedom by Americans began to be felt. So these Minutemen were farmers. They had rifles and plowing the land. And as soon as they saw the Red Tunics, that is the Red Army soldiers, they would take their rifles and go and fight. They were called Minutemen. Now, something interesting about well, of course, you have General Patton, who invaded Casablanca in 1942. And then you have also Harlem. If I could find something for you in Harlem, no. Okay, so thank you so much for your patience. I hope this is useful to you to know the 7 key words and the landmarks of the history of the Anglo-Saxons. Enjoy it and have a good night.